Many people talk about the ups and downs of married life, but no one really prepares you for life after your spouse passes away. Welcome to Widowhood Real Talk with Tina, a safe place for widows, widowers, and their friends and family to talk about love and loss. Find comfort as you listen to honest conversations between Tina and invited guests who've experienced the loss of their forever partner. Share their stories of love, grief, and healing. You are not alone in this journey. Join today's episode and discover a wealth of resources and learn how to connect with others who are traveling the same path. This is Widowhood Real Talk with Tina.
Hello, Widowhood. Our guest today, part 2 from AJ last week, but today we are talking about his journey of being a single parent, how to determine the right time for dating, and his concept between moving forward and moving on, and a book he's written. Let's get into this conversation now. Hello, AJ. Welcome to the Widowhood. I should say welcome back to the Widowhood.
Yeah, it's great to be back, and thank you for this wonderful opportunity.
Oh, thank you. The conversation we had last week, well, they'll listen to it last week, but they understood like all the knowledge you had from the catfishing and everything else. But this conversation is focused on your journey, which has made what you do and how you show up so passionate. So thank you for taking time twice to get together and have this conversation. And I want to start by something we were kind of talking about a little bit in the pre-conversation. And what I want to just say thank you for bringing your voice to this conversation, because I believe, and tell me your thoughts, that it's really hard for men to make themselves vulnerable and just transparent and share something as personal as this. What are your thoughts on that?
I agree. It's very, at the time, it's very rare when I first started speaking about my grief loss and being a widow at such a young age with my wife's passing, the brain cancer, raising my daughter as a single dad, that many people just didn't talk about it, especially men, because we have that idea that we're supposed to be macho. We're supposed to have all the answers. We're supposed to have these sort of even toned feelings. And as we learned over time, perception changes at the social media with the amount of resources becoming available, where men like myself find it's okay to talk about their feelings. It's okay to talk about their losses and join different groups of people to help each other through these tough times. You know, back when my father was little, this was never a discussion point. It was not even a thought. It just became part of society. And that generation, as they continued to mature and eventually into the adulthood, is they would carry that same notion that we don't talk about anything. It's not proper. Today, I think it's healthy. I think it's a very important attribute. Everybody talks about their feelings, right or wrong, different or not. It's important because that's how you heal, especially during a grief loss.
And that rings so true to me. My question is, how did you go from the mindset that you were raised under to that first time that you started talking about this? What was that pivotal point, and what did that look like for you starting to articulate?
At the time of my wife's passing, I did not know that I was pretty much preparing my whole life to handle different grief losses, only it wasn't a grief loss of a loved one, right? It could be a loss of companionship, could be a loss of an ability, it could be a loss just having anxiety or something like that. And how I prepared is just internally, is that sometimes you don't know what you're made of until the unthinkable happens. And that's where you start building up that self-esteem, that confidence. And sometimes you just throw everything out the window and say, I need to talk about this. And as I continued on my journey to self-healing, I realized it's not necessarily about me anymore. It's about helping others overcome and cope and eventually take steps forward within their lives so they can influence others. And when we go through these types of unthinkable losses, there's just something alive that comes in within you. And I think a lot of that's just personality driven. experience, but also being comfortable in who you are and where you want to go.
Thank you for sharing that. And your wife's name, if you don't mind us honoring her?
Sure. My wife's name is Cory.
Okay. And have you always been comfortable with who AJ is?
No, I had lived a very sheltered life about who I was. In a sense, I had grown up with a loss of an ability, which is a hearing impairment, not understanding how it would impact me not only as a child, but as a young adult into the workforce and who I am today. And I chose to keep my entire life private. And one of the things Cory taught me over time was nobody cares. Nobody thinks that we are our own worst critic of ourselves, and we get it into our mindset that everybody's talking about it. You ever go to a room and you walk in and people are engaged in conversation and conversation stops, people look at you, and then conversation resumes. Our first thought is, what are they saying about me? Do they not like the clothes I'm wearing, my hair? They not like how I look? But in reality, they just acknowledge your existence and they're going back to the conversation that they were engaged with, and it had nothing to do with you. And that's something that she taught me over time. And it wasn't until I wrote my book, Keep Those Feet Moving, where I thought I was writing for my daughter to help her understand who Dad was. It actually turned out to be very therapeutic for me to express myself further. And as the book was released, I had some reservations of what would people think? How would people react? People who've known me that may not have known certain things about me. And the area I really became comfortable in is just getting uncomfortable and realizing my work is much greater than me today.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned about when you first started speaking about your pain helping other people. But as I hear you talk about the book, it really was the first place the work needs to start is with ourselves. And I want to circle back to that because you probably have heard the catchphrase, turning my pain into purpose and doing all these things. And I feel like it can put an unrealistic amount of pressure on a new griever to think I'm being selfish. If I'm thinking of myself, I need to figure out how to make purpose out of this. I need to be helping other people with my pain. I would say take care of yourself for as long as what that needs to look like, and let life tell you if and when that timing would set up to help someone else. Because my husband, when he was dying and I was at the end of that hallway screaming into a phone to my sister, and the medics were helping him, I was not thinking of a podcast. This evolved 6 years later out of feeling like God directed me to do. But I feel like people hear conversations, look at what he's doing with his grief. He wrote a book. Look at what she's doing. This was not the genesis of our grief. What would you say to that or add to that or expound on?
You're spot on in terms of your thinking. And it's not about what everybody else is doing. It's about what makes sense to you. When it comes to grief, we all understand watching movies, shows, and the perception is that we're supposed to act a certain way. You're supposed to mourn for this many days. You're supposed to look and feel the way you're supposed to do things. And it's not really a proper portrayal of grief. I've always believed that what you do is what helps you sleep better at night. As your body continues to heal, your mind continues to heal, you're able to think with a little bit more clarity in what it is that you want to do and how you can move on, whether you can honor a loved one by celebrating an anniversary, a birthday, or something that holds personal significance, where a favorite spot that you used to go to. I always recommend that when it comes to grief, and not necessarily for all grief loss, it can be really dedicated on what makes you have that ability to take steps forward. And it's not about somebody else. There are individuals who grieve that search for companionship right away because they like feeling connected to somebody. But it doesn't mean they're looking to replace their loved one with somebody else. They're just looking for companionship. Sadly, sometimes social media, sometimes those movies, and the old way of looking at things through experiences sort of get in the way of our grief. Best advice I can give people, take a deep breath. There is no blueprint for grief. One day, as you finally start to wake up and you take steps forward, that's where the healing process begins. And it happens naturally. You can't just put it on a calendar and say, okay, on this day, I am not going to mourn it. I choose to take life and celebrate my wife's legacy. And that's what keeps me going. I didn't think about that when she passed. I took a couple of years not knowing what that purpose would be and how it would lead to a book and going on podcasts. But it just felt natural. And I smile because when I think of her, I think of the wonderful memories. I think about all the great conversations we've had. I'm cherishing her legacy and passing that through my daughter and through others through my work.
That is beautiful. You also said you don't know what you're made of until that moment. What did you find that you were made of that you didn't realize?
At the time of my wife's passing, a lot of people expected me to sort of fail, as I would collapse emotionally. I would struggle with raising a daughter on my own. And part of it because people had a perception of who you are or who I was, and thinking about my hearing impairment, thinking about the struggles I had with different aspects of life. And I knew it was just the opposite. I knew I had to remain strong during the funeral. I knew I had to keep my head high. I had to keep a straight face and just lead many through this challenging, difficult time. And at that moment is when I realized that people are looking at you, which is me, and expecting one outcome. And I wasn't going to let them see that outcome. In my private moments, I shed some tears, I took some deep breaths, and I rallied around my daughter, who was 1 year old at the time, for strength. And that's what got me through those really tough, challenging moments. When you go through the unthinkable or any sort of setback, it's at that moment that you decide deep down, what is your next move and where are you going to go? That's where the passion, the fire burns from within, and you start taking that energy and moving toward greater good. It doesn't happen overnight, but for some of us, sometimes that pushes that final on and off switch button and just propels you even further than you could ever imagine.
Wow, it sounds like the phoenix rising. I hear that often, or the butterfly transforming, depending on which one of those resonate with you.
It's important. It is really important with that, because when you come to the end of your own life, whenever that's going to be 300 years from now, right? And you want to look back, and many of us look and think about regret. What didn't we do? What didn't we say? I want to be in a position, among others, that we look back with gratitude, that sense of accomplishment, and say that we were able to do such and such. And I think that's the rewarding aspect for our own personal soul, is that we continue to push through, even on dark days and times. And for those people who just live their lives in regret, it just means that they haven't found that connection, little switch to help them go from the mourning into the zestful of life.
That is something to think about. In those years that were difficult and you were trying to find AJ and what life would look like, and can you share maybe one of your most difficult moments and just how you may have just been in that difficult moment, not about getting through it, but what that looked like? Because oftentimes people will see someone later in their grief journey and feel like, why am I still crying? Why am I still feeling this way? They look fine. But I think there's value in them hearing what those difficult moments look like to remind them they are not alone.
My difficult moment was because I was only 33 at the time and seeing a lot of younger families starting to expand with from one child to multiple children to going through their own family. And my darker struggle was realizing that I don't have that. Everything that we talked about and dreamed of and sort of planned, having multiple children, living in this great, nice house in an affluent neighborhood, all changed instantly. And that was tough. And we did lose some of those connections of friends that we had, and the dynamics changed because they were used to seeing both of us together. And now there's only one. And when you're grieving at a younger age, not necessarily because of the loss, the family dynamic, but it's the loss of those connections. It's hard. The key that I learned is I stopped comparing myself to others. We were all different. I will never say I know what it's like to walk in someone's shoes because that's not necessarily accurate. Each of us have our own story, our own history and experience has shaped us who we are today. And once I learned to stop comparing myself to others, stop looking and saying, well, they're a family of 4, we're only a family of 2, my daughter and I. I always use the analogy for basketball, for those that are into sports, is sometimes when you're parents, you can kind of play zone defense with the kids, right? I'm playing one-on-one with my daughter, right? And she's finding ways to outsmart me. I'm trying to find ways to balance her and teach her their values. And I didn't always get things perfect, but we have such wonderful memories, looking back all these years, and we're very close today. And but once you start comparing others and you start embracing what you have, I started embracing that special bond for her and I. Again, it doesn't always translate to perfect pictures, right? Getting your nails done, getting your hair done, some of the things that mom and daughters like to do together. I've done my very best, and my hair didn't quite look out the way that she thought it was going to look like. And sitting with her, smelling some of the fumes of the nails and stuff was a little too much, where I had to step out. But in the end, we made it work, and it was very helpful to really just form our own connection. And that's how I started feeling a whole lot better about the grief. We still honor her mother every day. We still have pictures in her bedroom of her mother and her together as a small child, infant. And I think that's healthy. And we're building onto that legacy.
I would agree. For someone else that is having to venture into solo parenting because their spouse passed, are there some lessons learned, some advice, things that you would want to share to them specifically?
Absolutely. Engage with your child or children. Put your phone, your electronics away. I spent a lot of time one-to-one with my daughter away from the electronic. And we had some really amazing times that we had together. She knew that she was the focal point of my life. And at times, as a single parent, we get caught up in our careers. And I actually left a job because the time consumption of the work that I was doing was impacting our playtime together, our one-to-one moments that we would have at night, where we would read stories, we'd play in the basement and do things because I was so consumed. And one day she asked me the question, but how come we don't do this anymore? And the next day I resigned from my job to ensure that she was the most important to me. As a single parent, we have an obligation, yes, to ourselves. We want to be happy. We want to do all the right things. But we also have our children that we are connected to, and the memories that we share with them not only help us, but also shape their lives as well, as when they mature and become adults and maybe with families of their own, they have those proud moments of being with them one-to-one. That's the best advice. Just engage with them. I know we get tired. I know there are moments that we just want to be able to just sit on the couch and just close our eyes. My daughter is 17 years old. She's a junior in high school. I still tuck her into bed every single night because that's what she asks me to do. And there are days where I'm tired. There are days where I just need to get things done around the house. But I always remember this principle. How many other parents would love this opportunity that I have to just tuck her in, give her a kiss goodnight, talk about a few things, say our prayers. One day she's not going to want that, and I'm going to miss that. So be with your children. Embrace the uniqueness that you have, but also continue to celebrate.
How have you been able to keep Cory's memory alive for your daughter over these 16, 17 years?
We have pictures. We openly talk about certain things. And early on, I felt it was important to be upfront with her and not sugarcoat certain things when she would ask me, how did mommy die? What happened? And there were terms that I would use to help her differentiate things a little bit more. I called it an illness that she had with cancer, as opposed to being sick. Because when you're a child, when you hear being sick, it's more like, a running nose, a flu bug, a cold, or some sort of other ailment. But an illness is a little bit different. And I didn't want her to think about being sick, that she had the same thing that her mother had. So I was very open from the beginning with her. And there were moments where she played the card where, mommy would want me to stay up later tonight. And I'd be like, no, I think mommy wants you to go to bed early.
That one-on-one was getting intense.
And sometimes, we would have to use the mommy card here, or sometimes she'll be like, well, mommy would want me to wear this. And I'm like, oh, no. It gets humorous, right? Because, when she was little, it was much easier to dress her because all the outfits, the top and the bottoms matched, right? For the first couple of years. And I've always dressed her in like the fancy outfits because I didn't want anybody to say, well, look at this guy. He doesn't know how to dress his daughter. He's got the worst color code, combinations that we had. So I always put her in like really good stuff. It's like when she got past, like I think it was the 5T stage where the clothing, I was kind of lost on what to dress her on because I couldn't figure out what color schemes there were. And we would joke around and say, well, do you think mommy would like this? Do you think she would like that on you? And, she had her own imagination. And, what was unfortunate is that she really didn't have much of a memory of her mother. She knows the stories, she knows the pictures, the videos, but we honor the anniversaries, we honor birthday, and we celebrate. And I think that's really the key in this whole thing is that I chose not to run from this and help her grow up and help her understand that her mother loves her. Her mother is still with her in her heart, looking down on her. And I do believe there are certain forces of nature at hand. There are times where she has gotten herself into a little bit of a challenge, and the only thing I can explain is that her mother sheltered her from it. And I still take that and we share that memory and say, oh, I think mommy was watching over you today. And that helps, again, that helps with us with our grief, and that helps us with our healing. So we go and we try to keep it natural without overdoing it, right? And that was important to me early on, to celebrate. And I use that term a lot when I talk about grief. It's part of our honoring, our showing appreciation, our affection, but it also helps her grow into a young adult, knowing that the memory of her mother may not be there. She has those artificial warm feeling, knowing she's still with us.
Those are some gold nuggets there for sure. AJ, in the grieving community, people will say moving on, moving forward. And some people are very passionate about not wanting to say I'm moving on versus moving forward. To me, they mean the same thing. It's semantics. I mean, it's one or the other. But do you have a preference? And if so, or does either of those matter to you? You just use them interchangeably?
again, going back to whatever helps people sleep at night, right? And sometimes we get caught up on words, we get caught up on various phrases that hold significance to one person, but might mean something different to the other. I always use the words like, where are we going? Keep those feet moving. Where are we going? And that holds personal significance to me. And it's important is during that grief, where you're going, moving on, moving forward, whatever phrase and terminology that resonates with people. Once you start talking about that, it's not like you're moving on from that person, like you're forgetting about them, you're not mourning them any further. But what it means is that you're moving through your healing process. You're learning the coping strategies, whether indirectly, directly. It means also you're taking a breath and realizing that you have a lot of life still to live. And it's okay to mourn and have a little setbacks here and there. But as you continue to move on, move forward, where you're going, it shows strength in the healing process. We are never 100% fully healed. The healing process helps us the mind, helps the body bring comfort and soften the overall landing.
I would agree. And definitely never 100% that this is not impacting our life on a daily basis in some form or fashion. Every time you look at your daughter, I'm sure you're thinking of her mother and what life looked like then and the anticipation of what life would have looked like in the future. In being a young widower and the concept of moving forward, what did that look like when you started thinking about dating or what life would look like going forward for you?
I never wanted to date again. It was a challenge partly because when Cory was dealing with the illness, we never talked about the what if, what should happen, the inevitable happened, because I chose to continue to fight for her, believing that we were going to find a cure, that we were going to overcome this brain tumor that was and we never talked about, well, if I go first, I want you to find somebody and continue to live your life. And deep down, I know both of us would have said, definitely. But when you don't have that conversation and you don't have that real in-depth knowledge to hear it from them, it holds you back from the dating aspect. And sometimes you feel like you're kind of cheating on your spouse. You feel that, is it possible to love somebody, be with somebody? And again, that goes back to the mourning, the feeling of, and it took a long time for me to realize sometimes you miss that adult companionship. And it wasn't until my daughter, who was about 9 years old, came to me and sat me down on the couch and says, Daddy, we need to talk. And I'm thinking, okay, we're going to have a talk about something in school. We're going to have something about the playground or friend thing. And she looked at me very directly and said, I need a new mom. I'm missing out on so many mom activities that I see my friends have with her. And that's when I realized it's not about me. It's also her. My choosing to not date, my choosing not to do any of that was having an impact on her as well. And recognizing that was such a critical aspect for me, a wake up. And I started laughing in a sense. I'm like, did somebody put you up to this? Is there something that I need to know about? But she was genuine. She handled it very maturely at that 9 years old and said, I need a mom. She did throw in a couple humorous things that I won't share too much, but from a dad perspective, when you're 9, 10 years old and you're developing, there are certain things I can't answer that moms have a better way of deciding. And that was like, I think she's like, see, Dad, you can't even handle that one, And that's where they got a little humorous into that.
Proving her point.
Yeah. So she came well prepared.
Wow.
But that's really how the whole dating aspect came about. Because I swore up and down I would never. And I did go through and talk to somebody professionally and ask, how do I let go of that thought channel that I'm having, that cheating feeling, even though I know that she would have wanted it. Without that reassurance verbally, yeah, I was just stuck. And that part of that morning, but as I continued with the term, we move forward, move on, where am I going? I realized it's a healthy journey that we are going on together. And she was involved from the beginning.
Wow. And looking back, what was dating like for you?
Oh my goodness. It was so challenging in a sense because as a single dad, you have to find somebody that is interested in not only you, but is interested in your child. And then the child has to accept and sort of give approval on who you're dating. So it's a lot easier when you're single with no children, and because it's you kind of weighing. Now you've got some other variables that are coming into the picture. There's some dates that I went on. My daughter eventually would meet, and she'd look at me and go, "No, Daddy, no." And I'm like, what? Tell me, what am I missing? What am I seeing? And then she would say something. What it came down to is finding somebody you can trust as a companion, someone who realizes my marriage ended through a tragic, the unthinkable, and who's secure within themselves to realize they're not competing my spouse. What they're doing is complementing the companionship and taking on a different type of role where they're not trying to be the mother or the significant other for the child, but what they're doing is they're very genuine and just letting that natural ability come through. Children are a lot smarter when it comes to dating than we give them credit for. They see things that we necessarily don't see, which is, they say love is blind, right? And having that trustworthiness and openness with my daughter helped tremendously, because she saw some things that were a little strange, that maybe somebody said something to her when I wasn't around, or observing certain things. And I go back to the thought process is that she came to me, my daughter, and said she wants a mom. It's a different thought process, because one day she came to me and said, "Dad, I want a little sister. Can we go to the hospital and pick one?" And that was how she thought that you got children. And I had to explain it doesn't necessarily work out that way, right? And then she's like, "Well, could we go to, someplace and pick out a mom?" And I'm like, it doesn't necessarily work out that part. We have to give our children a lot more credit. But the dating part was challenging. You have text messaging, you got apps, you've got people have different ideas, different agenda. 2 weeks ago, we talked about catfishing, right? In terms of when it comes to dating, where widows and widowers have this perception they have all this accumulated wealth, and people are attracted to that wealth, when in reality, we just used that wealth that we inherited, if we were fortunate, to pay for medical bills, to pay for the funeral cost, and whatever little money is left behind, we probably did something with it. It was either for the children, for ourselves, put it away for another day. And there's a whole different aspect today of dating than what it was when I first met my wife. Text messaging wasn't even around back then. So I don't know what some of these abbreviations meant. I felt like I needed like a dictionary next to me, what LOL meant, or some of the other terms that were used at dating. I think the one that got me was when they said TY. I didn't know what TY was. I thought it was like somebody's name, Ty. I'm like, oh, that's weird. Why are they calling me Ty? I'm AJ. So there was some humorous moments looking back.
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was a whole different animal in terms of, but the key was just trying to find genuine people that had a great heart, complement our lives, and not rush into trying to fulfill a void out of necessity, filling it based on the natural ability that you're ready to move forward, to be in the presence of someone and learn about them. For me, it took my daughter to put me onto that dating map. And without her having that conversation with me, I don't know if I ever would have dated again.
Wow. And it sounds as if she had some really good, keen observations as far as women that were not suitable for you guys as a family or for you. So, flip question, what does it look like with your daughter dating, and how is your energy being brought to that if she started dating at all?
She claims she's not dating. I don't know. She hasn't come out to tell me. You know, she does go out with different groups of people. But I've always said that I'm going to trust you until you give me a reason not to trust. You know, let me know where you are. Let me know that you're okay, that you got to that place. I do not track her. I know a lot of parents today, they track their children. It's not necessarily because they're being nosy, it's because they're looking at it from a safety concern. I use the honor system. You know, if you say you're going somewhere, that's where you went. If you're saying you're going with people, that's who you went with. When it comes time when she brings home somebody to date, I have to take a step back and let her learn, right? She has to decide what she wants in a companionship, you know, what her interests are, and supporting her. There's a lot of times that I go back and look about growing up as a child, growing up in her shoes of being a teenager, right? And what did I want my parents to know? What didn't I want my parents to know? And I choose to have a much more open relationship with my daughter than I had with my parents. And if she wants to tell me something that may not sit right with me, I have to open. A couple of years ago, she was 13 years old, and she asked a weird question. Goes, Daddy, what if I get pregnant at 13 years old? Like, what are you going to do? And I thought about it for a second, saying, we will cross that bridge when we get there, because we're not there. I said, take a look at the facts. We'll take a look at what's happened, and we'll strategize there. And she said, would you be mad? I said, it's not about being mad. It's about understanding how we got to this position. And a lot of times I speak to her the mindset of teaching certain principles. And sometimes it backfires on me. There was a time where, perfect example to your question, about a year and a half ago, she wanted to go to Colorado. We live in Illinois, to visit some campground. I took the position that she and her, one of her girlfriends, was going to go with one of the moms, and they were visiting some girls in their camp. I didn't ask the right question. I made the assumption that she was visiting friends from her camp. And when I was texting with the mom, because the mom was going to go, I said, we're good to go. And she's like, well, I don't think the boys have the same spring break as the girls. And I'm like, what? Boys? What do you mean boys? Like, I thought they were going to camp friends. Like, yeah, but these are the boys from the boys' cabin that they're visiting. And I said to my daughter afterwards, I said, you visiting boys? And she was like, yeah. I said, you didn't tell me. She goes, no, Dad, you didn't ask. Which is why I've always taught her, don't volunteer information if you're not being asked. So she turned it on me. And at that moment, I've already told her previously that she could go visit her camp friend, not thinking that it could be the opposite gender. So when it comes to the dating aspect, I look at things a little different. It means I'm doing my job right as a parent to allow her to grow, to allow her to make informed decisions that she thinks is important for her, providing guidance along the way. And I choose to provide that support, even if I may not agree with something, because the relationship, the connections that we have is much more important. As we all know, relationships come and go, and you want to be able to help steer them. And maybe the light bulb goes on at the right moment, right? But I fully support when that time comes. It will be a big step for me.
Indeed. It sounds like you have raised a very wise young lady.
Thank you. Thank you. To borrow my uncle's phrase, I've done a lot of great things in raising her, but I'm sure I found some ways to mess her up as well.
I think all of us can say that about our parents. So when you found the right woman to be your companion in this journey of life, how did you know, and how did you make your daughter aware?
My daughter was involved every step of the way because that's just our connection. And what was interesting, it's built on trust, right? And companionship. And I started to trust this woman that I was dating with my child, and understanding that she had her best interest. And she had two daughters of her own that were a couple years older than my daughter. And the girls got along very well. There were moments where, there's some jealousy here. The big girls are doing one thing, this one little one's doing this. And when we have that open connection, it also did help that the one person I was dating at that time, I've known her my entire life, so I could trust her. We grew up 4 houses down from each other very early on in our lives, and then we went our own separate ways. So I had some familiarity that I knew that she wasn't going to take advantage of me. But I also saw her interest in generosity toward my daughter and treated her. And as single parents, we've all been there where we get caught up somewhere with traffic or other challenges that we're trying to meet and beat the rush to get our child out of daycare before they charge us $25 a minute for late charges, right? Knowing that I can count on her and say, I'm sorry, can you pick my daughter up? I am not going to make it. And over time, my daughter started feeling that connection and realizing, coming to me and saying, I think we found my mom. And to differentiate the women in our lives, we call Cory mommy, because that's, my daughter knows her as mommy. And then my current wife that I remarried, she wants to call her mom because she likes that feeling that she has a mom, but knowing that she will never replace her mommy. But it's, again, that complimenting. And that's how we knew, because it takes a special person to recognize that they're not there to replace, but compliment, as we talked earlier. And that's how I knew it was the right. And I talked to my daughter and I said, what do you think? Should we do it? Should we move forward? Should we become a blended family? What are your thoughts? And she was like, yeah, that'll be great, and she was involved in the process and was there. And I didn't do the traditional, similar to what we talked about in the pre-discussion. I didn't want to follow the same footsteps, getting on. I did it a little bit differently. And I don't even think I said, will you marry? I said, do you want to get married? I think I just said, I changed the wording or something, because being born on the 13th, sometimes you get a little superstitious too, right? But she was there and thought it was the funniest, the greatest thing. And today they have a good relationship. I mean, it give and take at times, and that's where I come in and have to mediate some of the things. But overall, my daughter and I have made things work. We still are, like I said, very close today. And she gives it to me as much as I try to use those as teaching moments back. There are some days where she'll come and say, oh, why did you get remarried? We talked about this. You said you wanted something. And then, jokingly, of course, she goes, oh, yeah, I forgot. What was I thinking back then? But, it's the humor. At our house, I try to raise her around humor, around laughter, smile, and doing everything I can to give her the quality of life that she may not have gotten early on with the loss of her mother, and tried to compensate as much as I could. And there are times I've overcompensated, in terms of shopping. I didn't know what American Girl dolls were. And one day I'm like, oh, let's go down to the American Girl doll store and we'll buy you an American Girl doll and a couple of accessories, not knowing what I was in for. Went into the store and I had to walk right back out and look at the title and say, oh my gosh, am I in the right place? $300 for a doll? Like what? She listened and go, Daddy, you said we were going to get a doll today and the accessories and everything. So things like that we look back with fond memories on.
AJ, we have talked about so much over these last two conversations, and I am very grateful. If someone wanted to reach out to you, how would they contact you and how would they find your book?
Thank you for the opportunity to share. Best way to contact me is through my website, keepthosefeetmoving.com. You can order the book through our website, or you can go right to Amazon and order just by typing Keep Those Feet Moving by E.J. Coleman. The book itself is very easy reading. It's about 160 pages with some exercises at the end of each chapter to help promote curiosity, to help you kind of do some self-discovery, but challenge you to think about where you want to go in life and how you want to achieve some of that. Designed to be light reading, where you can pretty much pick it up at an airport and read it in an entire flight. Designed not to carry through it, but that's the best way to get a hold of me, through there. I'm happy to answer questions, return emails, and provide as much guidance and where resources such as yourself and where people can turn to for additional support.
Thank you. I have asked you tons of questions over these last two conversations. Any questions you have of me? Like to give people opportunity to be the podcaster and I be the host for a moment.
Sure, that's a great question. I don't think anybody had asked me that part. But what it would be the one lesson that you've learned through all your podcasts that you can share with others who are thinking about maybe even starting their own grief support among their friends or looking for ways to connect with others?
Wow, no one has ever asked me that question. That's a good one. The one thing that I have learned most in 3 years of podcasting and helping people, everyone has something I can learn from. And being open to that reality creates curiosity. And that curiosity draws me in to want to learn, because one conversation can change the dynamics of what you think you thought you knew and going forward and how you move forward in life. The other thing that I have as far as the connection with people, it is so valuable to have community, because some days you just don't know how to get out of bed. Some days you want someone to listen as you talk about your loved one and not feel like they're picking up their phone and they're trying to hurry up and scoot past. But there's also value when we pull back and reflect in our moments of introspection. And finding that balance is helpful. Someone should know if you've not shown up for 3 or 4 days, because one of the biggest things when our spouse is no longer here, our accountability partner, the person we would come home to talk to, the person that I shared different things with no longer exists. I now have to put emergency point of contact. Maybe I don't even have one anymore. It's an opportunity to think about creating friendships, an opportunity to bring people into your sphere, and to be gentle to the people in your life that you thought were going to show up but didn't. Realize until your spouse passed, you probably didn't have the emotional bandwidth or capacity to support someone else and understand they're in uncharted territory. And maybe you taking the first step to reach out to your family and friends and invite them to be on this journey with you. And you two will learn together what support you need, but sometimes being okay to just tell them, I just need you to be there. We may never need to talk about my spouse's passing. I just want someone to watch TV with. I want someone to go to the movies or go out to eat with. And I just need company. And it's okay that you need that. And your feelings are valid. And to embrace those, journaling is extremely helpful. But I will say a lot of times people say there's no roadmap to grief. But there are some things I have found that are not healthy coping skills that deter your ability to keep living. And if you're doing some of the things I'm going to mention, to maybe evaluate how that is impacting your grief. If you are spending an immense amount of time of, if I would have done this, that would have not happened. If I would have done this, I could have prevented that. The reality is we all have a moment that we will no longer have this life journey. And we don't have the capacity to often alter that for someone else. So if the what ifs are driving you to so much pain and anguish, please reach out to a mental health professional to get the coping skills to work through that. If you are leaning heavily on drugs, alcohol, or different things to mask your pain, then that is probably not serving you well in your grief. If you have totally isolated, that you go to work or come home and you don't speak to anyone else, you don't do anything else. And I understand that can be hard because often most of the things we did were with our spouse or our loved one. I remember going to the grocery store, sitting outside crying because I didn't want to do something I had to do without Mark. The first time, horrible. Second time, less horrible. Third time, negligible. Fourth time, I can do this. Maybe ask someone to go with you, but reach out. Don't isolate yourself from everything. The fourth thing is when people feel like the universe or God or a higher being personally attacked them by their loved one dying, can leave them feeling hope. Those are four things I have found in a lot of conversations, that if you're heavy in one or all four of those things, to evaluate how it is impacting your grief and seek somebody that can help you work through those.
Now, I love that. I mean, those 4 steps are critical. It's almost like a checkpoint, right? If you're saying yes or I don't know, maybe, then it's like a reality. Say, okay, now I need to take the proper steps to talk to somebody to work through that. I found times in grief that we don't ask ourselves questions. We just function how we feel, how the day is, and we just go about it. And the warning signs are never always there. But I did like those 4 points where you're asking yourself some pretty key questions. And I would even encourage people to take what you wrote and write them down and look at them on a daily basis and just keep that journal and say, yeah, if there's a yes to any of them, maybe one day that we have setback, right? But if you're seeing a pattern of multiple days or more days than not, then is there an opportunity for you to network and seek some assistance to work through? So I like that. That was a great lessons that you've shared. Thank you.
Thank you. I want to say thank you for allowing us to share with you. I am so sorry for the person that you have lost that has drawn you to this conversation, but I'm glad that you found us. And I look forward to seeing you next week.
Well, thank you all for listening today and allowing me to come and share some insights into my life, into my stories. And there's one key takeaways that I will share with you is continue to celebrate your loved ones, continue to honor them, cherish the memories, and keep their legacies alive, because without them, we would not be who we are today.
Thank you, AJ.
Thank you for spending another episode with Widowhood Real Talk. If you found the contents of today helpful, share the episode to anyone you know who may need it. Subscribe to the show and tune into Widowhood Real Talk each week. Then, visit widowhood-realtalkwithtina.org to join the community and access additional resources. Remember, you are not alone in this journey.